What if the biggest royal battle surrounding Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet was never about money, security, or even family feuds, but about two words placed before their names? What if a decision made more than a century ago quietly detonated one of the most explosive constitutional controversies the monarchy has faced in decades? Because behind the smiles, the interviews, the palace statements, and the carefully chosen words, a silent war was unfolding. A war over status, a war over identity, a war over whether two children growing up thousands of miles away from Buckingham Palace would forever remain connected to the institution their parents publicly walked away from. There are two children living in California who are still too young to understand the storm surrounding them. They wake up, play, laugh, and live ordinary childhood moments. Yet every detail of their future has already been debated by lawyers, royal advisors, constitutional experts, and commentators across the world. Their names are Archie and Lilibet, and long before either child could speak, powerful people were already arguing over what they should be called. The story begins more than 100 years ago. Not with Harry, not with Meghan, not even with Queen Elizabeth. It begins in 1917 when King George V made a decision that would echo through generations. At the time, the royal family was expanding, titles were multiplying, and the monarchy feared becoming crowded with princes and princesses. So George V stepped in and issued a royal decree known as the Letters Patent of 1917. At first glance, it looked like a dry constitutional document, but hidden inside those legal words was a rule that would eventually place Archie and Lilibet at the center of an international controversy. The decree carefully defined who could be called prince or princess and who could use the powerful style of his or her royal highness. It was designed to limit royal status, not expand it. Cold, precise, unemotional, for decades, the system operated quietly. Nobody paid much attention. The rules existed, the family followed them, life moved on. Then Harry and Meghan had children. Suddenly, a century-old document was dragged from the shadows and placed under a global microscope. Every sentence was analyzed. Every interpretation was challenged. Every word became ammunition in an increasingly emotional debate. When Archie was born in May 2019, something fascinating happened. Confusion immediately followed. Some experts argued he should receive a royal title. Others insisted the rules did not automatically grant him one. The legal interpretations collided. The constitutional arguments multiplied. And while experts debated, the palace remained careful with its language. At the time, the public explanation seemed simple. Harry and Meghan announced that Archie would not receive a title and suggested they wanted a more private life for their son. On the surface, it sounded straightforward. A young family choosing normality over royal privilege. But was that the entire story? That question never disappeared. Because beneath the public statements, the legal debate continued. Quietly, relentlessly, like a fire smoldering beneath the floorboards. Then came September 2022, and everything changed. Queen Elizabeth II died. A nation mourned. A family entered a period of transition. But hidden within that historic moment was a constitutional trigger that instantly transformed Archie and Lilibet's status. The second Charles became King Charles III, the rules shifted automatically. Suddenly, Harry was no longer merely the son of the Prince of Wales. He was the son of the sovereign. And that changed everything. Almost overnight, the old arguments disappeared. The constitutional reality became dramatically clearer. Under the long-established royal rules, Archie and Lilibet became entitled to prince and princess titles. No dramatic ceremony followed, no grand balcony appearance, no triumphant announcement, and that silence itself became intriguing. The palace simply updated official records, quietly, almost cautiously, as though everyone involved understood how politically sensitive the moment had become. Prince Archie of Sussex, Princess Lilibet of Sussex. The titles were there, official, recognized, recorded, and yet the situation somehow became even more complicated because possessing a title and actively using it are not the same thing. This is where the story starts feeling less like a constitutional lesson and more like a family mystery. The titles existed. The institution confirmed them. The records reflected them, yet public usage appeared inconsistent. Sometimes they seemed emphasized, sometimes they seemed absent. Sometimes observers wondered whether the titles represented a bridge between Harry and the monarchy. Other times they looked like another source of tension. Every decision suddenly carried meaning. Every announcement sparked speculation. Every omission generated questions. And people began noticing something else. The palace itself appeared determined not to turn the title confirmation into a celebration. No fanfare, no major publicity campaign. campaign, no emotional display, just a quiet acknowledgement of constitutional fact. That silence spoke volumes, because constitutional reality may be straightforward. Human reality rarely is, and human reality was becoming increasingly complicated. At the center of everything stood two children whose lives were already tied to an institution located an ocean away. The moment Archie and Lilibet became prince and princess, the debate shifted beyond titles and into consequences, because titles are not merely decorative. They shape expectations, they influence relationships, they create connections that can last a lifetime. And that is where another uncomfortable question emerged. What happens when royal children grow up outside the royal system itself? Most princes and princesses grow up surrounded by the institution that defines them. They learn its customs, they understand its expectations, they absorb its traditions almost from birth. Archie and Lilibet are experiencing something completely different. They are growing up in California, far from palace corridors, far from royal advisors, far from the machinery of monarchy, yet their names remain permanently linked to it. That contradiction sits at the heart of this entire story. The institution is part of their identity, but it is not part of their daily lives. And as years pass, that contradiction only becomes more fascinating. Because while titles may be written into official records, the meaning of those titles is still being negotiated in real time. And the deeper you look into this story, the stranger it becomes. Because the biggest mystery is not whether Archie and Lilibet are prince and princess. That question has already been answered. The real mystery is what those titles will actually mean 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or even 50 years from now. Will they become symbols of connection or symbols of separation? Because every path ahead seems filled with contradictions. Look at the lives of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. They are growing up inside the institution. Every day they are surrounded by royal traditions, royal expectations, royal responsibilities, and royal protections. They understand the system because they live inside it. They see the machinery operating around them. They are being prepared for futures that are directly connected to the crown. Now compare that to Archie and Lilibet. They are growing up thousands of miles away in Montecito. Different schools, different culture, different experiences, different influences. Yet on paper, they remain connected to exactly the same royal institution. It is an extraordinary contradiction. They belong to the monarchy while living outside it. They carry royal titles while being raised far from royal life. And every passing year makes that contradiction even more dramatic. Then comes the issue that has quietly fueled some of the most emotional disputes in recent years: security. For Harry, this has never been a minor issue. It has always felt personal, deeply personal, because from his perspective, security is not simply about protection. It is about responsibility. It is about safeguarding his wife, safeguarding his children, safeguarding his family. Yet Archie and Lilibet occupy a unique position that royal history has rarely encountered. They possess royal titles, but they are not children of working royals. They live outside Britain. They live outside the institutional structure that traditionally surrounds royal family members. As a result, they exist in a complicated space where constitutional status and practical reality do not always align. And every time this subject emerges, it reminds everyone of something larger. The separation between Harry and the institution was never clean. It was never simple. The titles survived. The bloodline survived. The succession positions survived. But many of the structures around them changed dramatically. Then there is the succession itself. This is where the story starts feeling almost surreal. Archie remains high in the line of succession. Lilibet follows closely behind. Real positions, official positions, constitutional positions. Most people dismiss this because the chances of either child ever becoming monarch appear incredibly remote. And logically, they are right. But monarchy has always been built on possibilities. Unexpected events have shaped royal history countless times before. That is why succession lists matter. That is why every position is recorded. That is why every movement inside the family continues to attract attention. No matter how normal their parents want their lives to be, Archie and Lilibet cannot completely escape the reality of where they stand. And perhaps that is what makes this entire story so emotionally complicated. Neither child chose any of this. They did not choose the titles. They did not choose the constitutional debate. debates. They did not choose the family tensions. They did not choose the headlines. They inherited all of it, just as previous generations inherited crowns, expectations, duties, controversies, and burdens. Meanwhile, another question hangs silently over everything. What happens when these children become old enough to make their own decisions? Will they embrace their royal identities? Will they reject them? Will they seek closer relationships with the family they barely know? Will they attempt to bridge the divide between California and the palace? Or will the distance continue growing until two branches of the same family become almost unrecognizable to one another? Those questions remain unanswered. And perhaps that uncertainty is why this story continues to fascinate people across the world. Because beneath the legal documents, beneath the titles, beneath the constitutional rules, this is ultimately a story about family. A grandfather who became king, a son who walked away, a brotherly relationship fractured by years of conflict, cousins growing up on different continents, and two children standing directly in the middle of a story they never asked to enter. The official records are complete, the titles are confirmed, the constitutional arguments are settled, yet the most important chapter remains unwritten, because the future of Archie and Lilibet will not be decided by ancient royal decrees or palace announcements alone. It will be shaped by relationships, choices, reconciliation, and time. And right now, as the world continues watching every royal development, one truth remains impossible to ignore: the battle over their titles may be over, but the battle over what those titles will ultimately mean has only just begun. The palace knows it, Harry knows it, Meghan knows it, and somewhere in California, two children are growing up completely unaware that one of the most fascinating royal stories of the modern era is still unfolding around them.